I guess if you could roll it all back and give back the premiership and say that all our players are fit and well and healthy and we still have been running it, having a normal life, we'd give it back tomorrow.
After 2006, we had the Fletcher incident in Vegas. The players probably partied reasonably hard. We started to get quite a bit of feedback. We had a think tank in November 2006 as a board, and where information was fed to the board, and we then realised we had to take some serious action.
Dean Cox, in his book, referred to double figures being the amount of players who were potentially using. Do you concur with that number?
We initially thought there was a minority, but what came out in Broome in November 2006 indicated that wasn't the case. It was a lot more people than we thought.
While the Eagles were shocked by the level of drug taking, systematic player lying covered up the depths of the problem, which at this point was out of control.
Oh, there's no doubt that from my meetings with club officials that the players lied.
I don't think so. I know so. I mean, you can only ask so many questions so many times, and you expect a pretty straight and forthright answer. And unfortunately, I didn't get it, we didn't get it, and some of the people who were probing didn't get it either.
You ask people deliberately, are they taking drugs, and they say no. So it took a long time for us to be convinced that we did have a problem. And there's always rumours, but when you ask people to elaborate, they won't. They don't want to be involved.
Ben Cousins' behaviour had worried the Eagles for some time, but when in early 2006 he swam down this river to avoid police, the point of no return was reached.
Ben Cousins slipped quietly into West Coast headquarters this morning, almost certainly for the last time as captain.
The Brownlow medalist this morning summoned to a meeting with the club's hierarchy.
His 5-year reign as captain has come to an abrupt end.
I think we're all really concerned for his health at that particular time. The playing group in particular could probably see there were signs that Ben was starting to miss a few training sessions. At times he wasn't coming to the club in the greatest state.
Look, there were worrying signs before then, and we were aware of them. We were aware of them as early as 2000, 2001. It was a matter of how they'd escalated, and Ben's behaviour at that time wasn't good.
As Ben Cousins spiralled out of control, tensions erupted when Andrew Embley and Daniel Chick came to blows at the club after a weekend confrontation had turned ugly.
Chicky thought that I'd set him up, which wasn't the case, but regardless of that, one particular afternoon I found myself at the club. I was just getting a massage at the time, and Chicky came in and started throwing a few haymakers at me, and a couple of my teammates actually got Chicky off me. That night I started to get a little bit upset and a bit angry that a teammate would actually come in and act like that. And so, being the silly bloke that I was at the time, I ended up making a phone call to Chicky, and I just left a voice message, pretty explicit and abusive, and just told him what I really thought of what he did earlier. And if he wanted to sort it out properly, then we could meet at the club the following day at 7 a.m. and we could put the headgear on and the mouthguard in. So the following day, I got to the club at 6:55 in the morning, and Chicky at 7 o'clock sharp comes storming in, and yeah, fair to say we didn't have time to put any headgear on or anything, and we just started going at each other. So I think Pete Worsfold at the time, who was running our leadership program, he must have just been starting work and just heard this massive ruckus, and thank goodness he sort of came in and got in between us, because he could have just gone forever.
As the off-field chaos worsened, the Eagles, in their desperation, turned to the AFL for help. They remained hurt by the response they received.
We just had to get to a point where we said enough's enough.
Yeah.
And we took that to the AFL. It was a difficult time for the footy club, because the support we thought we'd get from the AFL ended up, an inquisition.
What didn't the AFL do that you wanted them to do?
Well, we wanted, first of all, to test our players immediately, all of our players. And they didn't do that, and there are a lot of excuses why they couldn't. And then we wanted some assistance in how we were going to fix this problem that we had, and could they help us with that? And there was nothing forthcoming with that as well. So we're extremely disappointed with that because, I mean, this is was new territory for all of us.
At the end of the 2007 season, the Eagles saw two Brownlow medalists exit. Chris Judd by his own choice, Ben Cousins sacked. But it was the tragic loss of another club legend, Chris Mainwaring, which forever changed the Eagles.
I don't think you can really understand why that sort of thing happens, you know. I think that's probably the lowest point.
Have you tried to understand it?
Yeah, you try to reason with it. Well, how can this happen? But there's no reason, there's no rhyme or reason. It's just the way it is. It probably was I guess the defining moment that, you know, that was the end of it. It had to finish.
It appeared the AFL world had seen the last of Ben Cousins until Richmond Football Club threw him a last-minute football lifeline in late 2008. The Footy Show can reveal exclusive details of Cousins' first meeting with then Tigers coach Terry Wallace.
Yeah, it was quite strange. I mean, we picked him up from the airport, got him out the back door. We wanted to have a meeting where no one would sort of know where it was. It was unusual to say the least. So Ben came in, we did introductions, and Ben sort of said, well, look, I need to go to the toilet, and 5 minutes passed, 10 minutes passed, 20 minutes passed, 25, 30 minutes passed, and he hadn't come out of the loo. And I was sitting there, you know, wondering what the heck was going on. That was back in the time we had shaved his head at the same stage, so not sure exactly what was going on. His movements were quite erratic back at that time. Clearly, what it said to me that this was a young man that was in a very bad way. Now, then we had to make a decision on, you know, were we prepared to take that on? Did we have any responsibility to take it on? Probably the answer to that is no. But we did sit back in a board meeting and sort of say, if this young man, we decide to not give him an opportunity of getting his footy together, which means getting his life together, as a board, how would we sit if in 8 to 10 weeks, all of a sudden we woke up one morning and there was a news bulletin and something horrific had happened, and we believe that he was in that stage where that possibly could have been the case.
Today, the Eagles bristle at suggestions their premiership success was tainted.
No, I don't. Yeah, as I said, it was something I'm immensely proud of. Feel genuine sympathy for the players and their families who've had some battles since, but the overriding emotion is of pride of what that group was able to achieve.
It's probably something that really irritates us, you know, when people say the premiership was tainted. I mean, the only thing that drug abuse could have done was make the performance inferior to what it was, and I think it certainly affected us in 2007.
You just don't rock up on grand final day and win a grand final. A lot of hard work, blood, sweat and tears goes into it, and it's something that the whole playing group should be really proud of.
Did Ben ever play football on illicit drugs?
I don't think so. It's hard to say, but he was regularly tested. So it's hard to say, but I would doubt it.
I'd only be guessing, but I'd say unlikely no, purely because if you're caught with illicit drugs in your system on match day, then it's an automatic 2-year ban. So, you know, I don't think Ben was silly enough to be doing that 1 or 2 nights out from a game.
At the height of the carnage, the Eagles board rejected Trevor Nisbet's resignation. He has since led a culture makeover of the club.
It's now 10 years on, we're in a much better space, and we're really pleased that we were able to address it, albeit we had to go to the bottom of the ladder to do so.
With what the football club went through post-2007, they worked really hard on their culture and putting protocols and procedures in place to actually change the club and the perception that people had of the West Coast Eagles Football Club, and it had to be done.
Life after football has been very difficult for several of the Eagles Premiership 22. Their concerns are ongoing.
Oh, look, we've got several issues with probably 3 or 4 players, probably 3 in particular.
My last recollection of it was Ben when he came to watch Chris Mainwaring's son play at a local game, and he brought his own son, and seeing Ben with his son, you know, rolling around kicking the footy was a beautiful sight. And the only thing I did speak to Ben that day was, you know, how are you going, how hard's it been? And he said, you know, Kyle, I have 1 good day, 2 good days, and then I have about a week of bad days, so that's how it is and that's how it'll be.
I guess the disappointing thing is we weren't able to salvage Ben out of the wreck, and that's a real disappointment for us.
Do you worry where he's going to be? Trevor?
Oh, I worry every day. Yeah, it's you know, we would like him to be healthy and well and, you know, getting on with his life like, you know, a normal 36, 37-year-old should be doing. And we're not sure what space he's in at the moment because we don't have a lot of contact with Ben still, but, you know, we've always wished him well and hope he can overcome these issues.
An amazing piece, Damo. So much has been said and written about that team in the 10 years that have followed, but there was a fair bit in that.
Yeah, I think the depth of answers that those gentlemen can give now with the hindsight and the memories of it, Jim, was what sort of made it. And Trevor Nisbet's involvement in it too was there during it and offered the resignation, as he said, and now he's led them out of it. But the lies being told, I think that was a big takeout. The admission, the effective admission by Dalton Gooding that it was a majority, not a minority, and that just puts into perspective, out of 22 people, you've got a majority taking and using illicit substances during that period. And I think Terry Wallace's explanation too of the first meeting with Ben Cousins, while he gave answers for why Richmond still drafted him beyond that point, it probably, when you sort of hear it back now, produces more questions than it does answers.
It does. One of the fascinating things, that's the second time I've seen it, I had a look this morning, was that it wasn't just players v administration, the players were turning on themselves. I'd never heard about that fight between Embley and Chick, so that the friction within the club was intense as well.
Yeah, it was, and there were perceptions over what was being done with and around Ben Cousins at the time, and look, there's always two sides to every story. Andrew, I think, bravely decided to talk about it, I believe, for the first time publicly about what happened. And look, when it's all said and done, I think the whole build-up to that and other events that were similar to that, were barely scratched the surface, but that's the individual's right to not go too deep, 10 years after the event.
We should also point out, Damo, that you asked Andrew Demetrio to come on and contribute to that piece, and he didn't want to.
Yep.
But I'd be fairly confident that the AFL, especially when they were asked to blanket test their players, would point out that the agreement between the AFL and the Players Association under the illicit drugs policy would have precluded them from doing that at the time.
It did, but they were extraordinary times, Jim, and I can now see Trevor Nisbet's frustration with that. When you go to the AFL and you put on the table exactly what you know, and it took them a while to do that, and there were criticisms around that time for the reason it took so long to do so. But I think when you do ask for help, and you can see it, I mean, it's raw when Trevor Nisbet refers to that now, and Dalton Gooding also referred to that as well. But yeah, we did ask Andrew, and he's got every right now. He's not there anymore. He chose not to. I believe a fair bit of that criticism is directed at Adrian Anderson, who was the footy operations manager at the time, and also the fact that the AFL went into its own investigation after the Eagles had started theirs. They felt they were being blindsided